can't get to the next one until you've been
Yeah,
there.
right.
So I think that the other thing I was doing is, and I think probably by the time I got to college, like I had the switch had flipped. I was like, okay, I'm a human too. I can go out and do the things with the humans that are doing
Yeah.
things, right? And I had a really wonderful group of friends. Ironically enough, in the Baptist Student Union at the University of Richmond. I was not a Baptist. We
Yeah.
had several people who were not a Baptist. I was an honorary Baptist, I guess.
Yeah, of
and I
course.
know that, like, I feel like it was another one of those things where it was this exactly the right moment. I was there, with all the other people I needed, and I'm still friends with those people. Like there was enough of our faith that we had in common, and enough of our sort of place in life, like, that we were exploring and learning and, trying to understand who we would be in the world. And I think that was like what completed, like that was the end of coming out of my shell. And saying, I love being a human being. I love interacting with these people. I love doing things together in a community of faith where we can trust our core values. Like some of us are Presbyterians, some of us are Baptists. And at the time I was a Swedenborgian, so there were things we didn't have in common. Exactly, Bill. Good job. I was a Swedenborgian.
A Swedenborgian?
Uh-huh. Well, you heard of that, Bill?
No, you're going to teach me a lot, but this is one thing I want to learn about.
Right. So
wait, is that a religious thing or is that a food item?
It is. No, it's a religious thing. It's a if you went to a Swedenborgian church, it would look like kind of high church, like maybe like Episcopalian, like Protestant, but not really. There's a beautiful big cathedral right outside of Philadelphia, PA, in a town called Brunathan. I'm probably related to like 30% of that town. I'm
I'll bet.
Generation Swedenborgian. And I was married in that beautiful cathedral. So we were originally Swedenborgian. Remind me, Bill, how we got off on that. Oh, right. The Baptist Student Union. So I was the Swedenborgian in the Baptist Student Union. Yes, I was. It was an amazing thing to be.
Did they know what that was? I mean,
I don't know. They didn't. They didn't know what it was. There aren't that many. I think there must be like under 10,000 in the world.
The other thing about it is, I mean, for those people that, for those people that are not familiar, I mean, I love Richmond. Richmond is just one of those special places. And, my second law firm, our headquarters was in Richmond. So I was in and out of Richmond a lot in that area. But the Commonwealth is different. There's just something about that community and about that thing that's just different from a lot of other places that you live. And it's not different in a bad way. It's different in a good way. It's a different now. And again, when you were there, I mean, it was a few years ago, but when you were there, it must have been, you must have been very unique in that environment.
I think there was one other person that I was aware of in the entire university who was also a Swedenborgian. Like there was the two of us. That's all I knew of.
All right. Well, that's going to bring you out of your.
Yeah, it did indeed. But that was a good thing, right? But I think that, like I said, it was this collection of people who just all happened to be there at the same time, who were, wonderful for each other. A number of my friends ended up marrying each other. Like those are lifelong friendships. We just happened to be all in the same place at the same time on the same journey. Right. So I think that was, I credit them very much with finally, fully connecting me to the rest of the human race. And it was just
I'm sorry. The way you keep saying that makes it seem like you're a visitor from a foreign planet.
Well, I think I began that way. Like I seriously feel like story and imagination was my childhood. It was my life. I mean, I remember my mama asking me, do you want to have a friend over? I was like, no.
I've already got him in my head. What else do I need?
I've got 5 or 6 going here that you can't see. We're fine. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, have you ever been psychologically analyzed? I mean, I'm not suggesting
don't worry,
anything.
Bill, they don't talk to me. These friends.
No. It's cool. I think it's cool. I'm not suggesting that you're crazy. I'm just suggesting that how much richer one's life would be if, in addition to the live humans that we interact with, we also had the creative ability to create. That inner head, that inner person.
Bill, you do. Like your imagination is sitting right there waiting for you to use it. Some people engage with it and some people don't. And there are all kinds of ways of using it. I mean, you can use imagination, doing surgery or doing mathematics. I mean, a lot of it is, it helps you, I think it helps you engage the spiritual aspect of your life. Like, it's a child's like beginning understanding that not everything that matters can be seen.
Look, you can't be a person of faith. You can't be a Christian if you don't have imagination. I mean, just the whole notion of a resurrection is unimaginable. I mean, that's the word actually flows that way, right?
Right.
And so for us to really be truthful to our faith convictions, we have to imagine that which we cannot see and that which we cannot experience. Now, some are more gifted, like obviously you are, than the rest of us. But I do think that is an incredible skill that somehow we need to figure out how to flower that one also. Okay, I'm sorry. So we're now in Richmond, and you're bourgeonting with the Baptists, so that's kind of cool.
Yep.
And then what happens?
Then I went to graduate school.
Still in the area.
Still in the area. Yep. Close to friends. Still, pursuing. This was, it was the 90s, Bill. Like, it didn't matter what your degree was in. You were going to get hired just because you had one, right? So I was an English major, which is not the world's most practical degree. In fact, I remember there was a woman in my grad program who was studying in the United States for a year, but she was from England. Yeah. And I remember her telling us at the time, she said, she wanted to be a professor. Dickens was her specialty.
Okay.
She said, but the thing is, you have to wait for someone to die. And we said, what?
Yeah.
She's like, the tenure system they had in the universities there at the time. She's like, I'm just going to have to wait for someone to die. And I think that, in our world still, even in the 90s, like if you straight wanted to be an English major and nothing else, you would have to go and teach. Like that would,
that's it.
Because what else can you do with that? But by the time I got through graduate school, even I had reached the point, like I remember coming out of my comps, the big exams at the end.
Yeah.
And for like a week afterward, I didn't want to read anything. Like I remember avoiding eye contact with my toothpaste tube because there was a word on it.
Because why? What? Do you actually read your toothpaste tube? Do you read it?
Like I don't want to see it. I was so I was like, I need to rest. So
no words.
Than going and becoming a teacher, I thought, you know what? I need to get out of the classroom for a little while. So I went to work in Washington, which was a fantastic, amazing, adventurous life experience. Wouldn't have traded it. It was an education in many ways.
I don't normally. It was an education, but I don't normally hear those kinds of positive experiences coming from that, right?
But you have to remember I wasn't working for Congress or something. I was actually working at the National Research Council. And again, that's been years, so I don't know if this has changed. But at the time, their job was to be a nonpartisan advisory body. So, and they have all these different boards on various different kinds of sciences. And I don't know how this happened, but I just applied for it, was there, interviewed, and I ended up on the board of agriculture. And then partly through my time there, they changed it to agriculture and natural resources, I think. So the very first manuscript that ever had my name in it, published manuscript, I was manuscript staff for the nutrient requirements of swine.
Now there's a credential you left out of your CV that we should add back in.
I should add. Oh, you have no idea, Bill. Like I remember going in, like the people on our side who were doing manuscript, we all had PCs, and then you would cross over through this little door, and like all the graphics people were on the other side, and they all had Macs. So I remember going through the door to go talk to the people with the Macs, because this is an ongoing series of publications that is put together by experts, right? So they have them for dairy cattle, like any of the big domestic animals, like these are scientific standards for how you care for them, right? So we were putting out a new one for swine, and the last time it had come out was, I don't know, the 50s or something. So we had to look for a graphic of the modern swine. Like,
wait, have they changed a lot?
Looking. Well, apparently, because in the old days you just fattened them as much as you possibly could, but this was the 90s. Fat was bad now, so we needed kind of a leaner, like a more of a Porsche kind of swine. So I remember the graphics guy, like, I looked everywhere, I can't find this. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this one, and he popped it up on the screen, stretches it way out. So it's like, it looks like, a dachshund pig. And then he cuts out the middle and sticks the two ends back together. And that was how we got the nice, sleek, not so fat, modern swine. But I do remember thinking, my degree, my thesis was on Tennyson and his conception of immortality. Here I am with my fabulous British poetry looking for the modern swine. So
all right,
so
now I'm concerned. I'm concerned about something, but I just need to get this off my chest. So having just created this beautiful metaphor of looking back in your life and connecting the dots, I'm trying to figure out how swine portends what your new responsibility is. I'm afraid that experience we're going to have to figure out where are the swine in your new job, and we're going to have to cut out the middles or something. I don't know.
Bill, I don't think there are any swine in my new job, but I have learned that many of the more artistic of the Orthodox that I work with to this day, they use Macs, right? They're Apple people. Yeah. So there's,
absolutely.
There's something.
Yeah, it's a culture. It's a cultural thing. There's no question about it. There's a cultural thing. All right. So you're solving the swine problems for us, which is great because, I mean, somebody's got to do that work, and there is some good science behind that. I mean, I didn't know that before, but I've become, recently in the last 5-10 years aware of that. So that's good stuff. And Washington, D.C. is kind of a special place, and, there's all kinds of crazy things that are going on over there and whatnot. So,
it was an education in that. But the other thing I did there actually was help with, they would have these big national committees of experts that would come together and work on the manuscripts.
So there we go.
Event planning. So that was my very first experience of event planning was swine nutritionists.
Yeah. So now I'm putting it all together. Your experience at getting swine people together is very much your experience at getting people together in Ancient Faith Ministries, huh? Is that what you're saying here? Okay.
In a manner of speaking, perhaps, but no. But it was my first experience though of like big professional meetings, right? What are the nuts and bolts? You got to have somewhere for them to sleep. They need to eat, like transportation.
All the logistics that people take for granted.
All the things the things.
Yeah, we go and it's like, hey, it's all set up. Well, that didn't happen by magic. Somebody actually made it happen.
It did not happen by magic. I'm here to tell you.
Okay, so good. There's another dot that we connected here that makes perfect sense now. Okay. All right. So at what time did you tire of swine and decide there was more to life than pigs? Well,
what happened was I met a boy.
Actually,
he was not a boy. I met my husband in Washington, D.C.
He's no boy, okay? I'll just tell you that right now.
No, as a matter of fact, he was definitely not. He was a professional. He was a Beltway bandit. He was a Marine Corps combat veteran. He was in the original war. And then had come back. He was in the reserves when I first got to know him. And he was working there's a lot of contractors around I think this is still true, around the Beltway. These are people who place.
Every place,
Right, like the IT people who are so expensive that a company doesn't retain them. They just buy them for a specific project. So he was a headhunter essentially working in that, but beginning to discern his own stewardship calling at the time. And we got to know each other. He was actually my ride to, I think I had met him at like a church summer camp or something the year before. So he was like a person I kind of tangentially knew when I first moved to DC. And I was going to go to the Christmas pageant at the little church. I didn't have a car at the time. And it was kind of outside where the bus subway system works. So he's like, I'll give you a ride. So that was kind of the beginning of our getting to know each other. And then the other thing I love to tell people is that this is like the internet is a thing now, but not like my child would not recognize it in its form at that time. But America Online was like the big, it was the big new thing. Like we all had AOL addresses and they had invented, as far as I know, instant messenger, right? Like you could chat with somebody. So we both had AOL accounts, right? And like we started chatting on, when I say this to my daughter, she just looks at me like, you're so old.
Yeah, really. I mean, foreign experience, but it's kind of like the old "You Got Mail" movie kind of thing, right? I mean,
it is exactly like my generation. We watched that and we're like, oh yes, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly
I know what that is.
We know what that is, right? So we just had such a good time. Like there are all these international restaurants, and you could go down to the monuments and the museums. Like there's just so many things, interesting cultural things happening in DC. And we would, I remember walking by the Potomac in the moonlight and. Oh, it was fabulous. And we just talked and talked and talked like for hours at a time. So much talking.
If I asked him the same question, would he agree that he got to say anything?
Of course he would.
Were you really talking or both talking or were you
we were. Like,
were you sharing the story of what was going on for him? Because that would have been exciting enough.
You know what? My mama told me one time that she thought the reason we gotten married is because I finally found someone who talked as much as I do.
Good.
But I remember sitting up till like 4 a.m. talking about like the theological implications of the King Arthur legends. Like it was an amazing meeting of the minds. And I knew pretty.
Yeah.
Once I figured it out, like I was like, well, this is the one. So
look, you have that kind of conversation. There's just no question.
Mm-hmm.
If you can have that kind of conversation, it's obvious.
Yeah, I remember like we were friends for a while first, which I think is a fabulous thing. I was kind of the last person to figure out that we were more than friends. Like my friends would make fun of me. They're like, "Do you see what your face does when you talk about him?" And I'm like, "What?" And they're like,
"Yeah,
what?
Right,
what?"
Right. Yeah, you're
right?
Miss Self-Aware because all these things are going on in your head, but in the meantime, what is obvious to everyone else is oftentimes
Right.
not
I'm
so
just
obvious
like
to us.
lost
Yeah,
for sure. But
yeah.
I remember he actually took me out to dinner at a lovely restaurant, and he actually asked if he could court me. And I just remember sitting at that
Oh,
table and
wow.
like looking across at his face and thinking, realizing I didn't think this was ever going to happen. I didn't think that this was something real. I thought that, things like that are imaginary. They're beautiful and they're in books, but like here it is,
Yeah.
like it's a real human person sitting across from me saying this to me. And I went home and I have a stuffed bunny. I still have him somewhere. His name was
Oh,
Rupert.
cool.
And he was the only one in my apartment when I got home. So I just said, Rupert, I just met the man I'm going to marry.
So Rupert was the first to know.
He was the first to know. Yes. And of course, we dated we courted for a year before he proposed. But Rupert was the first to know.
Hang on a second now. So now we got to take a little rabbit hole here. No pun intended. Okay.
For sure.
So there's obviously something special about a man who in those days would use such a gracious term to begin a relationship. So tell us a little bit about Father Martin's background, or Father Marty.
Father Marty is a soldier's son, and he grew up in military bases. I like to say he's never had a civilian moment in his life. All over the world. I mean, he lived in Panama and Germany and Kentucky, and wherever the military sent him. His dad was in the Signal Corps in Vietnam, and then he went to a military academy and then into the military himself. And his one of the things that I've loved about him since I've known him is there was like a woodcut or something. I don't remember the artist. I don't remember anything about it except for that it was in one of my middle school social studies books. And it was during the Middle Ages, and it shows like, sort of a field, and it has this sky above it with stars, and there's a person who's climbed up on a mountain on the side of the woodcut and has grabbed the sky and is peeling it back, trying to see what's beyond it.
Oh, wow. And what a great image.
That's my husband, right? Like his sense of his own humanity and of purpose and of service and of just like human existence. He's always been, with his hand on the sky, peeling it back, trying to see what's beyond it, always needing something more than, the mundane. So he was just saying what was natural to him. Of course he would ask me if he could court me. Like,
of course,
it's just a, strength and honor, right? Like he's
absolutely.
A soldier and also then a priest, right? So that's that, the philosopher king, right?
Right.
A warrior, and then a spiritual warrior. As his life
but it also shows a depth. It also shows a depth of values, yes. Right? That is the kind of thing that one should look for when they're looking for, or when they find, somebody special in their lives.
Yes.
Is that there's a shared value, or at least there's an inspired value that you could get your hand around and stuff. Okay. So now you're courting in DC, and then what happens?
Well, then my soldier husband realized that God was calling him to ministry.
Now there's a left turn there, right? Yeah.
Well, it's funny when you go to military chaplain school. Like, I don't know if everybody knows this, but chaplains are not allowed to carry a weapon. It's actually against the Geneva Convention, right? And if you are you say you're a chaplain, you're caught with a weapon, chances are they're going to shoot you because they think you're a spy. Like, it's just not something that you do, right? So
you're carrying a different kind of weapon. I mean,
you're carrying a different kind of weapon, right? You have to put that down. And he's a combat Marine. He liberate Kuwait City, right? Like, he's shot at people and they've shot at him.
Right.
So this was definitely, but this again, that's that hand, pulling down the sky, looking for, what's beyond the horizon. So he actually applied to seminary on the kitchen table in my apartment. And then at the time we were Swedenborgian. So he moved up to Philly to go to seminary there. And it was sort of a turning point for us. I, at this point, realized that, Rupert and I were aware that this was the man. So Rupert and I, we moved. But I was like, that's why I went to work for the National Board of Medical Examiners. I was like, I'm getting a job. I'm not going without a job. I'm going to go, that's the right thing to do. So I was, living across town from him as he went through seminary, and then, became ordained. And we had our first parish was in Colorado. they have a program where you are a junior priest for a year, right?
Right. Good
you're
program.
working with somebody else, and then you have your own parish, which is when we went to Seattle. So
how long is, I mean, I'm going to show my ignorance in a lot of ways, but one of the ways I'm going to show my ignorance is how long is a Swedenborgian seminary experience?
Seminary is 3 years. I think that's a pretty standard. It's like a really meaty master's degree, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
And
MDiv kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. It's MDiv, and then ordination, and then you have this. Well, actually, at the end of it, you have a sort of like an internship. Then you have ordination. Then you have your year as a junior.
Right. What was he before?
Pastor. Pardon?
Did he have a faith tradition before he
Not
became
really.
Swedish?
Well, I always like to say my husband read his way into, through, and out the other side of it, because he's a big theology head. I mean,
that'll happen.
Huge reader. It'll happen.
That'll happen.
Yeah. So, but yeah, his mama, I think, is Baptist. I think his dad's agnostic. Like, he just sort of had sort of a basic respect for faith, but not a not a faith background in that sense.
So what? Tell me what the reactions were, because I think I'm so passionate about encouraging those who might feel a calling to the priesthood or in some other capacity of service in the priesthood to not reject it or not turn away from it or not ignore it, right? To just actually lean into it and say, okay, it may or may not be the right thing to do, and I'll figure that out. I mean, but in the meantime, tell us about how that happened with the two of you, because you're bringing him now to your faith tradition, and he's learning about it. He's actually serving as a priest in it, but something called him. Something worked in the soldier to make him make that sharp left turn.
God,
was it you?
I mean,
was it Rupert?
No, it was definitely not me.
Okay.
I think that one of the things that people, being a soldier, there are lots of ways to do it. There are as many different ways to be a soldier as there are soldiers, but it also, it puts you in a very, it can be very clarifying, right? Like, you're dealing with life and death and human beings in the most difficult, raw, sometimes the most holy, selfless, beautiful human love you can witness in the military. And people who lay down their lives for people that they're never going to meet, people that they have not taken the time to judge whether they're worthy or not.
Right.
And so much of, there's obviously a lot of politics around the military, but veterans will tell you that in the end, it's personal. Like, it's you and this core of your brothers and sisters in arms. And in the end, that's who you're with. That's who you're fighting with.
That's family.
Fighting for.
That's
your family,
is your family. Right? They got your back. You got their back. Everybody's got everybody else's back.
Right. And that, you're good. It never goes away. But I think, when you're in those situations, you get to know yourself very well. And you get to know, what your observation of being human is. And you decide what you're going to do about faith, because you might die at any moment. And the people that you love, you're going to have to think about, eternal life. You might decide you don't believe in it, but the question is going to arise, because
it's ever present.
Right. It's a situation where the spirit is never very far away.
Right.
So it actually isn't that big of a step in some senses, from soldier to priest. And I also think that it's important to keep an open mind. It's very easy for people who have not been clergy to think that they know what it's like to be clergy. And I think you can watch a person be clergy, but it's not, it's a job. Yeah. It's a calling. It's a reflection of who you are as a person. And it's going to have way more dimension and life and conflict and excitement and all that. Like, there's way much more to it than you're going to be able to discern until you step into it, until you say, well, this is forward motion. The next place my life is going is where this is calling me. I'm going to get into it with both feet and find out what happens.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because one of my former law partners, who was a Navy SEAL, and so we did a lot of deals together and stuff like that, and I could always tell that there was a faith. I mean, he was, again, kind of Southern Baptist kind of thing, and he grew up in an impoverished African American community, and he had grown out of that in the sense of he'd gone to school, and it's the classic American success story, right? And of course, the Navy SEAL program was very good for him and gave him great discipline and whatnot, and which made him therefore a very effective lawyer, I might add.
I'm sure.
But I could always tell there was something else going on in him. So every once in a while on deals when we'd be working like late at night and stuff like that, we'd get into these faith dialogues. And he was the first one that opened up my eyes to the closeness that true soldiers, and for that matter, first responders, right? Have with a notion, a constant notion of, possibility of death and what comes next. And that whatever the faith, whatever you call it, right? There's something that has to be there.
Right.
Otherwise you'll go crazy. And that's,
yes.
That's what he said. He said, the good news is, like you said, there was that band of brothers and, he knew that, everybody had each other's back, but there had to be something more than that. And I think that is an interesting journey, and maybe you and I have just figured out the problem for our priest shortage in the Orthodox Church. Maybe we need to start looking more discreetly or more intently at military folks, because I think they probably do have an extraordinary skill set to be an effective parish priest, as well as a probably more heightened sense of faith awareness than most people just wandering through life.
Well, and I think, people, it's easy to, you see a lot of military stuff in the movies and everything, and they've got all this great gear and high adventure and everything. Right. But one of the things I've learned from my husband, I think one of the biggest things I've learned is what service is.
Yep.
Right. And
exactly.
Like we call them service personnel, but it's just a word, right? Like it doesn't, but if you stop and think, like, service is doing hard things out of greater love, whether it's convenient or not. Right. Like that's sort of the essence of military life in many respects, for the family as well as for the soldier. And I think that there is a lot of clergy life, which is the same thing.
Absolutely.
Is doing the hard things, doing the hard, good things, out of obedience and love to the higher thing.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think that you that's a very beautiful articulation of it. And I think that's something you need to write out, because if you haven't already done so. And I think the other component that's in there is the component of vision, right? Because every good soldier if they're properly led, has clarity of vision. And one of the many things I learned from my former Navy SEAL partner is we'd hit these, very complex international, merger and acquisition transactions, blah, blah, blah. I'm not trying to brag. I'm just saying they're crazy kind of things sometimes. And all of a sudden we'd hit a snag and the deal looks like it's going to go in the toilet and off the rail. And I'd get an email from him, and the first time I got it, I had no idea what he meant. He sends me an email that says CM. And I go, what's that mean? He says, it's what we used to do in SEAL training called continue mission. In other words, we have an objective. We have a vision of what we're trying to do for this client, or in this case, for this parish, or for this ministry, or for this person that we're talking to, right? There's a vision of where they want to be, which is different from where they are. And the discipline that soldiers learn, among many others, is that discipline to stay focused on the vision and not worry about the setbacks along the way.
Yes.
And how perfect that is for a priest. I mean, that's, because that's happens all the time. I think. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think it's the important ability to remember what is still true. Yes, this is all blowing up all around you, but what is still God is still God. You still are ordained, or you still, you're still enlisted or whatever, all of those things are still true. So what you just ran into is that it isn't going to be easy. Okay. A lot of the time it's not.
Yeah. Welcome to life after
But everything
Eden.
Around that is still true. Right.
Yeah. I mean, we fell from grace. And so that's the way things are, it's like, okay,
right.
Pick up
heaven yet.
Pick up your Rupert and let's get going here. Okay.
That's right.
All right. So y'all got married, and now you're in Colorado, and he's recognizing two things. Number one is he's recognizing that his service in the military prepared him for this, and probably even moving around when he was a kid prepared him for the life of a clergyman, unfortunately sometimes. Right. And he's also starting to question, or you're starting to question, or somebody's questioning whether the Swedenborgian thing is the thing, right?
Yes. That was completely, in some ways, tied to two things. While we were in Colorado, 9/11 happened. And so my husband was still in the reserves. And at the time he was in the National Guard, because that was just, was most, closest where we were.
Sure.
So they got called up to go guard the Denver airport, and then they got sent on this tour around the state, teaching the new security protocols to all the little, like the little ski airports, in the back of nowhere beyond. We get to the end of our time there. We go out to Seattle, and we're there for a few years. By this time, the war is happening. And when we were out there, he was with a reserve unit, and we several things were going on at once. One, we're, are kind of pushing the walls of our faith experience. And two, he was realizing, the war is here. It's here for a while. He's probably going to get called up. And if he's going to go, he wants to go with his guys. He wants to go active duty. He doesn't want to be a reservist anymore. Right. So we just had this moment where all those things kind of came together, and he let the church know that, he was going to war. So he went back to active duty. And of course, when he had come off of active duty, back in the day, he had been an infantryman, and now he's going back as
an officer.
Well, no, he was an officer before, but he's going to be a chaplain, right? Which is
a special officer. This ain't just.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, so they have their own. Bill, they have their own boot camp. There's a boot camp called Chaplains. It's amazing. Let me tell you, my husband's been through boot camp, and then there's chaplain boot camp.
I can't, somebody else had told me about that, and I've never really had that conversation any deeper on that, right? But I just had this notion of what happens in chaplain boot camp? What's that all about? It's kind of like. Well,
it's interesting. It's a lot of it. There's some things that are the same, so he was going to be a Navy chaplain because the Marine Corps uses Navy chaplains, Navy medical officers, right? Yeah. So when you're a Marine, then if you're going to be a chaplain, you go Navy, which, wow, that was a moment, but we managed it. So a lot of what they learn is about the, basically a military chaplain is church and state in one body, right? They're a military officer, but their job is, to the extent that it is possible within mission conditions, to defend the free exercise of religion, right? So if you're an American soldier, wherever you are, you have the right to, practice your faith as much as we can in the mission context is. And also a lot of military chaplaincy is essentially social work and counseling. It's people who are, in extreme circumstances, and the chaplain is the person they can talk to.
Sure.
So yes, you do church services, but a lot of what you do is just being in the literal and figurative trenches with, thousands of human beings who are on the boat with you, so to speak. So a lot of it is learning the policy side of it and stuff, but they do they learn firefighting. They did the helo dunker, if you're in a helicopter and it goes underwater, how do you get out? Port stuff like that. So they did that.
I just had this visual image that, chaplaincy school was, you conduct a service and then they start shooting at you on rubber bullets, and how do you continue the service during that going on? But thankfully it's not that, because that's a bad image. But
thank you. Someday you're going to have to get my husband on the show, Bill, because
he's coming on.
Just
give him heads up. Just give him heads up. Just give him heads up. It's going to happen. Yeah. Okay.
Just to bring it back together, this man and his mission, expanded my spiritual life and my, my regular life. We were moving to all these different places and meeting different people, and it put me into the military world, which is a completely different, perspective. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. It was very, very hard and very precious. And it was one of the things that taught me actually how close pain and beauty can be to each other.
Say that again. Say that again.
Is how close pain and beauty can be to each other. Right? In some ways they're completely linked. There would be no pain without beauty, and no beauty without pain, right? So it's it helped me grow as a human being in so many ways.
There's no way out of this. That's an essential part of your journey and your story and your predicament and probably your preparation, right? I think that's certainly a big part of that.
If you want to talk about leadership, pretty much almost everything I've learned about it, I learned from him, and I learned from watching the people who he was, being commanded by, and his responses to them. Their leadership is a thing that happens every second in the military, or the failure of leadership, right? Which you learn from that too. People who just go down in flames, you're like, wow, what happened there? And how it, you get to see how your moral compass determines your ability to be a good leader, even in that quote unquote secular setting. There's it's still important.
Yeah, Simon Sinek has done a lot of really great work with the military and the SEALs and others and stuff like that. And he's done a series of programs that really talk about how those value systems that are created in that community and that sense of family and that sense of brotherhood present themselves as the kind of people that therefore can be very effective leaders. Now, obviously, you see a lot of things and you can go off the rails, and certainly there's a lot of experience for that, right? But I mean, for those that can survive through something like that on the other end of the spectrum, they are incredibly well prepared to do the kinds of things that need to be done. And so if you're married to somebody like that, whether you like it or not, you get the benefit of that schooling, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. There's another dot. There's another dot that's connected. Okay. So how do we now move us into the ancient faith sequence? And then we go through OCN first, but
right. Ahead. Well, when my husband was out on the, as we used to call it, the big boat. So we have a little daughter. Well, we go through Hurricane Katrina. After we have Hurricane Katrina, because he was stationed in Mississippi where the storm came ashore. So that's a whole, that's a story you can ask him. So we have our daughter, and I wanted something more for her. Like I wanted I wanted faith for her. And we don't have time for that whole story. It's an amazing story, but long story short, I like to tell people that I was saved in childbearing, right? Like that there was this whole faith journey that was going on that sort of came to a head, or its heart, with the fact that I had given birth to this little human being who I loved with my whole being, and I wanted something good for her. And that was what pushed me, I think, through sort of the final stage of coming from where I was to saying I want to be Orthodox.
Yeah, but
and that actually, that's my husband too. Like he was the one. I told him I had this whole plan, Bill. Here's my plan. It was extremely
I have no doubt
plan.
of that. I have no doubt.
Bill, it was a terrible plan. Here's my terrible plan. So I thought about it. I was like, well, I think I'm pretty much at this point. I was like, I'm pretty done with church, but I can see that it's a positive thing. So I want my baby to have it. Okay. So and just imagine my chaplain husband hearing this. Okay. So I was like, so what I think I'm going to do, honey, is I'm just going to do some research. I'm going to find a church where I'm like, okay, I can fake it here so that I can bring our baby in, and then she can be a member. And my husband looks at me and he goes, no.
Oh, just one word, huh?
No, we're not finding a church we can fake. This is not what
this is not fake it till you make it. This has got to be real, because
I'm like, no. And he's like, if I was
going to see this cross on my
on the epaulette up here. Do you see this right here? So he said, if I was going to be something, I would be Orthodox. And I was well, honey, we're not. Yeah, he knew. So because he had met an Orthodox chaplain in the desert, right? Like there's this whole thing happening with him he was the one that brought us our faith. Like he was our chaplain, our priest first, right? He said, I was like, but we're not Russian, we're not Greek. And he's like, well, actually, you don't have to be Russian or Greek. You can still be Orthodox. So I said, well, I'll read. Well, meanwhile, so I was like, I'll start reading. Obviously he'd been reading because he was always reading theology, but he was also the chaplain corps really enencourages chaplains to get sort of the terminal degree in their in their field. So and they have this program with all these different universities that, because if you're in the active duty military, obviously your ability to go to school is limited. So they would do like these really intensives and then go home and do work and then go back. And so he was getting a degree from Barry University in Florida. Mm-hmm. And there was an Athonite monk in one of his classes.
Oh, wow. You got to be kidding me.
Right? He was only in the United States for this is what those things, right? Like they're just paths that cross, right? He was in the U.S. for about 5 years. He was in Father Martin's classes. And at this point, Father Martin's like reading early church fathers. And so he'd be making these points. And finally, Father Dionysius was like, there's a church with all this.
It's kind of like that old story from New Jersey. Like, I know a guy, So he's saying, I know a church. You come with me.
I know a church. Right. So long story short, we actually, when we got, my daughter and I were baptized, we actually flew Father Dionysius up from Florida to Seattle.
Oh, how beautiful.
And the priest in the church there baptized me. Father D baptized my daughter. Same water, Bill. Like my daughter and I went into that womb and were born again together.
How powerful.
It was one of the most intense experiences of my life. But
I can only imagine.
So after that, I had my saint. I had Saint Lydia. and I kind of wanted to get to know her better. And I did some there's not a whole lot that's known about her, but
no, that's
where
true.
do I always go in my life, right? I go to stories. So I was like, what if I wrote a story about St. Lydia? Right. So father was out to sea, baby would go to sleep, and I was writing this story on, diaper boxes and paper napkins, whatever I could, get a hold of, right? Because meanwhile, I'm like mommying a 2-year-old, right? So I wrote my story and I went online. I was like, Orthodox Christian Publishers. And of course, the first thing that pops up is at the time was Conciliar Press.
Conciliar,
so in my innocence, I got my little document together, wrote a little letter, and sent it off to Catherine Hyde, who was, and still is, the editor there. And
let's stop for a second. Just put context here. I don't want to stop your story, but everybody needs to understand that Conciliar Press was the predecessor to the publishing arm of Ancient Faith Ministries. And so that's why this is really integrated that story. Okay. So now you get a hold of Catherine and you say, so I'm going to tell you about St. Lydia.
Well, so I sent my little story, and here's what never ever happens in the publishing world. You don't ever write your first book, send it to the first publisher that you found, get a human being responding to you, and get accepted. That doesn't ever happen at all. And
I represented some authors, trust me, I know that, including a few New York Times bestsellers, which was interesting because they had everybody beating on their door. But for the vast majority of authors, man, it is starving time.
This does not happen. Catherine was amazing. So she wrote back to me, and it was interesting. As I was writing this story, at the beginning, it was kind of arduous. I was sort of thinking maybe it was a Sunday school curriculum, maybe it was a story. And then partway through it kind of found itself. And she actually put her finger, she's like, right there, that's where this came alive. Rip all this other stuff out, go back. And what I loved about being edited by her is she would tell me, this is a hole, and then I would fill it, right? Here's what's broken, and I would fix. So it made me a better writer, and it made a story that was publishable. So I got published by Ancient Faith, and that was the beginning. That was the beginning of my connection with them.
The beginning of the end, as we would say.
It was the beginning of the end, right? It's the beginning of the current era, right? Was that book.
It's the beginning. So the way I kind of look at it is, every chapter of one's life or every big story has a beginning and an end. And then it ends, and we stop writing that chapter and we turn the page, and now we're writing a new chapter. And that new chapter can be some things that we carry with us, and could be a lot of new things, right? So that's so that is interesting. And I think what the other good value in that is, here you are let's face it, an experienced writer, an educated writer, master's degree, blah, 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 blah. You've been writing your whole life since you were taking out garbage at 5 years old. But now you learn there's yet another level above that, in that when a good editor gets a hold of something and says, no, you're looking at this wrong, or you're looking at this right, but you haven't explained it clearly, right? That's that's that artistic dimension that you were talking about earlier, that an artist sees something. A good editor is that way.
Oh, editors are essential. My biggest piece of advice to writers is get one. Yeah. The best part about being published is the fact that you get to work with an editor. It is amazing, especially with a really good, she's a very skillful editor. The other thing that was important about that, Bill, was that was the moment where what I would say was my creative life and my faith life linked up. And everything else that happened afterwards was because of that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That was also important.
So St. Lydia is really an integral part of the story looking back. And it's not just St. Lydia, in the context of fact she's your patron saint, but in the fact that story and her story and the story that you wrote is an integral part of this next chapter that you're writing.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
So then...
And there's more. So,
tell me when to stop, Bill.
No, listen. Hey, I'm enjoying this. I mean, this is your. Wait. I'm telling you this is now your channel. Okay, so you tell me when to stop.
Oh, that's true. I'm going to keep talking, Bill. I forgot.
I'm good. Listen, I got all night. I got no place else to go, so it's all good with me.
Well, what was interesting was the book was published, and I was all excited, and I worked with the team at Ancient Faith, and I was like, well, I want to do more to market this book. Sure. So I started, Googling around, and I discovered that there was no such thing as marketing for Orthodox Christian books. I think this is still, in many respects, still true. Like the Christian publishing as a whole is segregated. There's secular publishing and Christian publishing, and they're both their own worlds, and they don't mix with each other really.
Yeah, and one doesn's look kindly on the other. So let's just be honest about that. Yeah.
And in the United States, at least, the Christian publishing world is hugely evangelical Christian or
yeah,
non-denominational Christian.
It's predominantly dominated by one perspective, one faith-based perspective. You're exactly right.
For sure. So, and I actually even found, so I'm looking around, I'm like, okay, well, I found one company, I can't remember what they were called, but it was a company that did marketing for Christian books. But I was like, I wonder who's behind this. I found, whatever the church was that was behind it. And they actually had a special page on their website about how to convert the Orthodox, who seemed like really nice people, if unfortunately they weren't going to hell. So I was like, well, I don't think this is going to work for me.
Yeah, you kind of do a little bit of digging and say, okay, there we go. I think I just met the devil. No, I mean, I'm joking.
I think I got to stop now, right?
Yeah, this doesn't work.
So I was like, well, I'm gonna have to do something myself. So I made my little WordPress website, right? And I started, doing guest interviews with other Orthodox creatives and writers. And that actually led to my position at OCN. I was a blog chief for them.
Right.
So fast forward to end of 2015, I have decided I need to move on from OCN, and I'm just, at the point where I'm about to start alphabetizing my husband's neckties because I just need something to do. And I want to, so I was thinking back about when I got published by Ancient Faith, because at this point, that was 2010. So this is a few years later. And remembering, how there wasn't anything there. And I thought, it'd be really great if there was like a professional development conference. So I know that, Ancient Faith's kind of a small company. They're all really busy. I'm sure they don't have time to do this, but I could volunteer, just to give myself something to do. Right. So I looked around and I still had Matt Dorning, the graphic designer. I still had his email. So I was like, hey, Matt, remember me from 5 years ago? And I said, wouldn't it be really cool if there was a conference for writers and podcasters and, people who are interested in this? Ancient Faith could host it, but I know you guys are busy. I would be willing to volunteer. Matt took the email to a meeting, and I got contacted. He wrote back and I was like, hey, so John contacted me and they said, yeah, we're definitely interested in doing this. Let's start talking. And so we got started. We're starting to organize this project. And of course,
wait, can I stop you for just a second? I always hate interrupting your momentum, but when I see a point of inflection, I want to make it clear for everybody, right? So, I mean, this is an example of initiative when someone sees a vision for something that does not exist or doesn't exist as well as it could be, sees a vision and says, I'm so committed to this vision that I'm willing to step up and put my name in the hat to do it. And, we'll figure out the money part later if there's ever money part, right? So that's you. Now, at the same time, there's another leadership message here, and that is the John Maddox side of the equation, right? So here now he hears from, one of his authors, if you will, but not somebody he's spoken to for a long time and whatnot. And somebody who was working at a different platform and whatnot, and says, hey, I mean, yeah, why don't we have a conference like this? Because that wasn't done then, right? There was not one before that. So, So in terms of great leaders, it's both taking the initiative when you see a vision to meet a need that hasn't been satisfied. And then on the flip side of that, if you're in a position of leadership and someone has taken that initiative, it's learning how to say yes and then, maybe taking your time to get it right because you have your own standards and values. And I think, so in that moment, that little interaction there, and Matt was the facilitator, but that interaction is a really, really powerful leadership message for both of you.
Well, and it got better. So once I got involved in it, I was like, wow, this is really fun. So I've become famous for having way too much fun at work. So I thought, it would be amazing.
There's a rule against that. I think someone's written it.
I think somewhere. There is somewhere. Yeah, I'm breaking that
just
rule.
Just ignore it, but there's a rule somewhere.
So once I got started working with them, it was really fun. I was like, wow, do you know what they really need? They need a marketing director. And I was like, I could do this. I know I could. Like, I actually, the OCA All-American Council was out in Seattle in 2011. And anybody, like any of the local authors came in. And so I worked the table there for a little while. And I found myself like, yes, I would sign my book or whatever, but I was like, look at this other book. And I was selling books and it was really fun. So I have this sort of confluence of happy memories and the fact that I'm really enjoying starting work on what became AFCON, right? The Writing and Podcasting Conference. So I thought I'm gonna make a pitch for John. So I made this whole pitch about why he needs a marketing director, why it's me, what I could do for his sales. And then I was like, Melinda, you need to calm down. Just calm down. You've only known these people just 5 years ago, but I've only been, interacting with him just a little bit. I just stopped another job. I just need to take a moment and just, figure out where my life is going. So I filed the whole pitch, like put it away. I'm like, maybe sometime.
You didn't send it in?
I did not send it to him. Did not.
Ooh.
About 2 weeks later, I get a message from him, or I think it was a phone call. Hey, we're doing a little bit of restructuring and we're thinking about adding a marketing director. Would you like to interview for the position?
No, you're kidding me, right?
I'm serious. It's like Mary Poppins. If you've seen the old Mary Poppins movie, the children write a letter to the, what kind of governess do they want? Their father tears it up. It goes up the chimney.
Right.
And Mary Poppins shows up. I'm Mary Poppins. Yes, that is exactly what happened. So I said, well, yes, I would definitely like to interview for that position. So I did, and I got hired. So January of 2016, I started working full-time at Ancient Faith.
So thank you for taking the time to go through the story, because I think it's enlightening and for people to hear, but I also hope that it's inspiring for people to hear, because, we never know who the people are and what part of their lives are when they listen to these programs. And I'm always astounded, when somebody comes up to me and says, hey, I listened to this program that y'all did about X, Y, and Z, and it really moved me. It was the right thing at the right time. And so when someone looks at the arc of your life that brings you to this leadership position that you're in right now, it seems very circuitous. It seems very disconnected and disjointed when you look at it forward looking. But if we look at it from the perspective you have now backward, not everything makes sense. I'm still trying to reconcile that garbage thing, but that's okay. And the Swedenborgian thing, I've got some work to do to understand that. But I do believe, Melinda, the story you just told is a powerful story of the intentionality of our Lord, our God, our Creator, and the need to have the patience and the faith of the ultimate vision to just take the next step, and then take the next step after that, and then the next step after that. Left foot, right foot, and then, okay, Lord, what's next? And what an amazing story. And I'm glad we now have it down, although there's a few little rabbit holes that we need to trace. And I think I'm going to have to, I will probably take that up with Father Martin, but that's another conversation when I get a hold of Father. Okay. I want to shift gears if I could for a second.
Sure.
Because I don't think you've done a really good job of explaining to me. You've done a really good job of explaining this notion of how you got to where you got to, and this notion of calling that's been nagging at you in a different way. But I suspect that a lot of people that listen don't fully realize everything that Ancient Faith Ministries does. So if you could take a few minutes here now and just give us a commercial, if you will, but seriously, tell people all of the offerings that this ministry provides that you now lead.
So our mission is to share Christ's victory over death, over sin, over hell, over all the sad, dark things, always. To share that victory with everybody who can see us and everybody who can hear us. And we do that by by relationships, all kinds of relationships, and also by creating content that witnesses to that in various different ways. So obviously this is Ancient Faith Radio, right? So we have, I think we're at 122 active podcasts coming from 140, 150 podcasters that are listened to along with our, live shows and our streaming stations and our audio documentaries. We have people listening in, I can't remember, it's like 120, 140 countries, people all over the world.
Yeah,
it's amazing. Letters from people in Ireland and in India and in Australia, like all over the world, which is just beautiful. It's also the strength of internet radio, right? It can go everywhere, which, land-based radio couldn't. So we have Ancient Faith Radio. We also have Ancient Faith Publishing, which, that was Conciliar Press way back in the day. We merged Ancient Faith Radio, Conciliar, they merged and became Ancient Faith Radio and Ancient Faith Publishing. We put out an average of about 16 books a year.
Slow down. Listen, everybody. 16 books.
Yeah, about give or take, between like 15 and 16, something like that. And they're for, grown-up books and children's books.
Yeah.
We have a big store where we carry the books that we publish, but we also have books from other Orthodox Christian publishers. We have worship supplies and greeting cards and icons and all kinds of just beautiful things. It's always worth going and just browsing.
And particularly as we are approaching the holiday season and you're starting to think about, how can I give something that is valuable and meaningful as opposed to, just the whatever the now super inflated thing of the day is kind of thing.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, and something that supports, Orthodox Christian makers and Orthodox Christian companies as well.
It's a win-win. So I mean, there's no way out of it.
It is a total win-win. Yeah. So we have those. We have, obviously, as we were talking about, we do some events online. We do events in person. One of our newer things is we actually have a global outreach now. We have a Chinese language ministry and a Spanish language ministry, which are just phenomenal. Headed by very, very bright, very committed, mission-minded people. We're starting to put out content in those two languages. That's a whole other, just take that moment.
Yeah, just think about that for a second. The notion of a Chinese ministry is really, really super amazing. I'm not diminishing, anything else. The Spanish language ministry is essential. There's no question about it. But the advent and the expansion into the Chinese ministry is yet another sign of the visionary outreach that Ancient Faith Ministries. I mean, it's kind of like I affectionately refer to AFM as the global faiths of orthodoxy in some respects, and this is an example of that.
Oh, it's beautiful. I mean, they actually the head of that is together with a friend of hers. They are composing a Chinese language divine liturgy, right? Translating all the hymns, translating all of the. There are pieces of it that are completed and are actually available. You can hear the cherubic hymn. It will stand the hair up on the back of your neck, Bill.
I can only imagine.
A holy, precious, beautiful thing. And if you start thinking about the implications of that,
yes.
And just looking at like our distribution network with that, that's a whole other amazing world. So all of those things. We're also very active on social media, which we try to. Social media is a complex, ugly thing, but we try to be a light there, right? We've evolved away from seeing that as primarily a promotional organ and made it really much more of a content organ. Right. So if you look at us, like if we're on Instagram, we share quotes from the fathers.
There's actually messages there that's meaningful.
Yeah. And that thing is growing. It is growing and growing. As soon as we switched over to that, it's doing well. So I think that's it. And also, we're also a company. We're also the best place on earth. I love our company. I love going to work. I mean, most of us are virtual, but
and that's the other thing you just led right to where I was going to go. Look, there's a lot of amazing things about this. When you start thinking about a global voice of orthodoxy, right? And you start to think about all the different medias that you talked about, all the different mediums you talked about, all the different geographies you talked about, and all the different product offerings you offered. And yet the vast, vast, vast majority of it is all done virtually without everybody, poor Matushka Trudy sitting in the studio at Chesterton, Indiana right now. But, you're up in Pennsylvania and I'm in Georgia. It doesn't matter anymore. That's just
we have staff all over the country. It's so true. Exactly. Oh, blogs. Did I not say blogs? We have blogs. We have blogs. You did mention it. I love you, H-Faith bloggers. I did. Good.
No, but I mean, I think that's an important thing. So go back to the kind of lead in that I did. If you look at the explosive growth of different mediums of communication, the message here that I think you have very effectively presented is that Ancient Faith Ministries is doing its best under the current circumstances. I'm going to get to that in just a second, to actually be present in those various places and in those various outlets and whatnot. Now, there's always help that we could use, and this is, I'm not going to do the listener supported commercial. I think that's coming up next, but in any event, I mean, I think you've done a good job of convincing everyone that you have to be crazy to take over the CEO position of a ministry that is that wide and that diverse, with nobody sitting together in the same conference room where you can beat on them. So.
It's not crazy because of the other people in the company. And I think it's an advantage to have worked here for, 7 years and to have those established relationships.
You have relationships. Exactly.
These are committed, gifted, sometimes quirky, good human beings who each, I think in their own way, in their own space, is a visionary leader. And I think the reason it works as a whole is because it is the sum of its parts.
Well, and I think that's an incredibly important point, is that part of, and actually you're foreshadowing something that's going to come up in, I hope, the interview that I'm blessed to do with John, for the December program. But the idea here is that this didn't happen spontaneously. It happened by committed, visionary people who see a vision of something, right? And they go to people that are open to looking at other visions and open to making changes and open to trying something new. And not everything you try is going to work out, or it may not work out the first time. It may take 3 times, and whatever it is, it is. But the whole point is, one of the Kuza Symposium things that I use all the time is that that the role of leaders is the future, and their job is change. So there's always a new opportunity or a new switch or a new angle on something that exists before. And good leaders know how to say yes, or they say yes, but, or they say yes, when, or yes, if, but there's always a yes component if it is related to the why and the values. And I think that's really kind of what's been driving it. And so that's kind of a natural segue. I got one more question before we take this break, and we're way past where we should be taking a break, but that's you and me. That's cool. It's just you and me talking right now, so it's all right. So we wouldn't be talking, you and I would be talking, if there weren't 2 dedicated visionaries named John and Tanya Maddox. And just share for a little bit for the listeners how you really met them. And you've already explained the recruiting process, which I think is fantastic because John did. But tell us a little bit about your connection with these 2 amazing, amazing people.
Well, I just love them. There's the short version. I think works. Once I came on board and started working, I remember years ago, even before I was working in Ancient Faith, reading a blog. I think it was a blog that Molly Sabrin wrote, and that's, of course, John's daughter, Molly. Right. And maybe it was a social media post. But what I remember about it was she was talking about her dad, and she said that he was a person who did the right thing even when no one was looking.
Yeah. And classic example of moral values.
Right. And I think that once I came to work for him, one of the first things he said is that, we operate here in an environment of trust. And I think that that's a fascinating, I could talk about that all night, but the basic thing I think that I saw in the pair of them, one, I learned what all in looks like, because John and Tanya, Ancient Faith is their 3rd child, right? There's a whole career's worth of love and dedication and patience and persistence and all of those things there. But what I have loved about working for John and watching, being in sort of in Tanya's sphere of influence as well, is it was an opportunity to recognize that this was a place where we could practice being a good Christian at work, right? Where a lot of companies have statements about, integrity and all of that, but no, actually not that, looking for, the image of God and the other people that we were interacting with, remembering to, expect the very best of them and to offer of our very best, and, to trust and to be trustworthy, to look for a charitable approach to something rather than a judgmental approach to something, that I think that the sort of the hallmark of the company that the 2 of them created together was that thing where, not only are work and life sitting right next to each other, but faith and work and life are all
in fact, they're one. In that environment, they can actually be one unified component. And that gets back to your fun comment, I bet.
It does. I mean, you can't take that lightly. It is a gift to be in an environment where you get to do that, where you get to be a person and be a person of faith and be a worker all in the same context. And that's what they made. That's what they are. That's what they did. And that's
all right, Melinda, now don't screw that up, because it's
thanks, Bill.
No, it's tough. It's tough. It
is.
Oh yeah, listen.
I mean, I think in some ways the first thing that I need to do is not to change it.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of those things that you we'll talk about that in the second segment here, because that's always the tricky part, right? But the value you articulated that John and Tanya brought is the environment of trust. And when you do, and I've just had the occasion in my doctorate program, I've just had the occasion to do a ton of research for a series of papers and projects on, what is really the core of excellent leadership. And I don't care who it is. I don't care what their background is. I don't care what studies they've done. Everyone 100% will put trust on the list, and most of them will put it number 1 on the list. That no matter what you do, you will never be an effective leader, and we would say an effective Christian, unless you establish trust. And trust is bound, tied together inexorably with faith. And so, those two things are just, they cannot be separated in any real Christian. And you got a chance to see it modeled in John and Tanya, and you have the opportunity now to lead that organization. So what a blessing that is, huh?
It is.
And what a scary proposition. And how appropriate that is. We have a scary proposition on the night before Halloween. Okay, look, we're going to take a short break so that you can catch your breath and get a beverage of your choice. And when we return, we're going to start really getting into kind of the future and the vision of Ancient Faith Ministries as we go under the Melinda Johnson era. Please remember, we would love to hear from you. You can feel free to call in at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. And if you haven't figured it out by now, we will actually stop and listen to you. So you don't have to worry about that, but we would love to hear from you. In any event, we'll be right back after a short break.
Bill will be right back, but the lines are open if you want to ask a question or offer your thoughts. The number is 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO.
Do you love to listen to podcasts on Ancient Faith Radio? Maybe you wish that you could help to make a podcast episode accessible to those who are hearing impaired, but you can't afford to sponsor a transcription. If so, and you love to type, here's an opportunity for you to consider. AFR welcomes volunteer submissions of transcribed podcast episodes. You'll find a list of episodes that have already been transcribed at ancientfaith.com/transcripts. At the bottom of that page, you'll find a link to the PDF of a transcription style guide that will help you to prepare the transcript in a way that will be most helpful to the community. Thanks in advance for helping Ancient Faith Radio to become more readily accessible to those who are hearing impaired. Thanks in advance for helping Ancient Faith Radio to be more readily accessible to those who are hearing impaired. Again, that's ancientfaith.com/transcripts. Thank you.
Stewardship Calling is back, and we are ready for your call at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Here again is Bill Marianis.
Thank you very much, and welcome back to Stewardship Calling in our first Wednesday program, where I'm speaking with Melinda Johnson, the new CEO, and the title I've given her, Chief Visionary Officer of Ancient Faith Ministries. Again, remember, we'd love to hear any questions you have, or you can talk directly to Melinda at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. And I don't know if anybody was paying attention, but I actually listened to the commercial breaks, and here's another example of something that is just really incredible that AFM is actually focusing on creating content for the hearing impaired, and yet another constituency that is, not been fully fed, if you will, on the Orthodox ecosystem, let alone the Christian ecosystem. So God bless. All right, Melinda, throughout the history, every successful organization, and not the ones that are not successful, all the successful ones have experienced a successful leadership transition. And that's where we are right now. And so John and Tanya have kind of finished their leg of the relay, so to speak, and they've handed the baton off to you for your leg of the relay. So let's talk a little bit about the change in your life and the change in your roles, both in the short term and in the long term. And if you want to then segue into some of your long-term vision things, I'm all in. So let's go with this. Where are we going in Ancient Faith Ministries?
Well, I was perfectly serious that part of what I am, what I hope I am, is stability. Is the person who, in every sense, has been, trained and raised up, so to speak, by my predecessor, by John.
Right.
That that's the person who taught me what this company is and how it works. And I was always very fortunate, in my various positions, that he let me try things and experiment with things, and sort of I had a taste of a lot of different parts of the company. I was very free to do that. And I think it's important to say out loud, there are a lot of people who love Ancient Faith Radio and who love our books, that this is the same company that it was. it's not going away. It's not suddenly changing. It's not turning into something else. On January 1st or 2nd, whichever is the Monday, when we get up and it's me, instead of him, it's the same place. It's the same company, the same vision. God is still God. We're still going in the same direction. I think where I'm fortunate is that a lot of the things that are going to be changes are the next natural thing that would happen.
Good point.
Like I'm thinking when I came on, I think there were 9 employees at Ancient Faith. And I think we're at 26, 27 now. Wow. So it's about, in 7 years, the company is 3 times the size that it was.
Triple. Yeah.
So I think sort of a lot of the next things are one, we've had a little bit of musical chairs because I'm going to stop doing what I was doing. So somebody else has to do what I was doing and somebody else has to do what they were doing. So we've had a little bit of that. But I think that there's sort of a thing in human affairs where when you have one big change in an organization, everybody's mind sort of loosens its grip for a minute. And you have a chance to nudge things a little, right? Like if there's something you always wanted to streamline a bit, right? Like this is a chance to do that. So we've made ourselves, I think everybody in the company is sort of consciously looking around going, okay, while we're at it, is there anything else, that we want to nudge a little bit? So, for example, the little department that I was running has the art people in it. And the marketing people. The art people, they're amazing. I feel like my one of my things my dad taught me, God bless him, was that a successful organization is one that knows how to manage creative people.
Absolutely.
Because they're different, right? They have different needs. Like sometimes they're creative in the middle of the night, not during business hours, right? So there's just, so I think, a lot of my job there was to create this, put a fence around it and the field of daisies, put the artistic people in it and say, look, here's your space. Here's your ability to concentrate. Here's your quiet, right? Go and make magic. And they do go and make magic, right? So, so the person who we originally hired as the social media manager to help me out, who then became our marketing director, is now going to be the director of marketing and communications, because
there you go.
Her position has evolved through our understanding that social media is marketing now.
Right.
Like you can't have one person doing that one and one doing the other. That doesn't make sense. And a lot of marketing as it's envisioned in this Orthodox context is really communications. We're not, what was that show? Ad Men? Like that is so not what's happening. That is not what we're doing. Right. So there's just been sort of, her name is Ellie Shackelford Bernasol, and she's fantastic. So look to hear more from her, but that is, there's sort of that level of readjusting. And then I think that we're constantly looking at what comes next. And again, that's not a change. Ancient Faith has been, on the radio side, maybe especially, but in general, John did a fantastic job of being aware of advances and changes in technology, right? And saying, we need to do that too. When social media came along, we need to do that to internet radio. That was a technological advance, right?
Absolutely.
Radio used to be a land-based thing, right? So that's a trajectory that's begun. We need to keep doing it. We need to keep watching. Video is a big thing now, right? That's where it is. That's where the younger generation is. What are we doing? Your comment about YouTube, right?
Yep.
We need to up our game on that front. So I think a lot of what's in front of us is to do the next thing that's been set up by the good foundation that I'm inheriting.
What a wonderful way to say that too. I mean, not in the sense of, I'm not saying that just because, people are concerned about what might happen kind of thing, but it is both A, so logical, B, it is so theological, in the sense of, that the apostles were constantly pushing at Christ, said, not the time, not yet.
Right.
But, oh, by the way, this is the next thing that I want you to do. This is the next place we're going to go. And so, it is both theological, and logical. And it's also kind of biological because, organisms evolve and grow, and they don't ever stay in a stasis state. I mean, there's always, cells are always reinventing themselves and things of that nature. And so, and I think you're wise to take the opportunity of a transition to kind of say what's next. One of my favorite quotes. Okay. So it sounds like I'm a Steve Jobs guy, and to some extent I am, even though I do not use Apple products. So I'm not a creative in that regard. But one of the things that I use in my strategic planning stuff, Melinda, is a quote from Steve Jobs when he said that it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire, and he's talking about Apple. He said, we hire smart people so they can tell us what to do. And I just think that is so wise. And that gets back to John's foundational element of trust. So that if you've made a wise hire, and not every hire will be perfect, but if you make a wise hire and, you know, they prove to be consistent with the values and the vision that's been created, then sometimes the most important thing you can do is get out of their way, you know, or give them some guardrails and then get out of the way, you know, and that's hard. That's hard, and particularly for those people that are perfectionists. And let's face it, writers have the bad rap of being, you know, kind of micromanagers of the words, so to speak, right? So, so it's, you know, yet another skill set that has to be developed. But I think I love the way you've articulated it so that the listeners will say, I don't have to worry. It's not like it's going to change overnight. It's not like under the Johnson era, you know, everything is going to be different, but there will be more, and it will be logical, and it will make sense, and it will make it more accessible and more useful to you. Is that and
I think one of the things, and I know John and I have talked about this, one of the things that's really cool about where we are as a company is, you know, there are sort of seasons in a company's life, right? And when you're a startup, everybody just does everything because you're just trying to stay alive, right?
Chief cook and bottle washer.
Exactly. And I think when I came in like at 9 people, like they weren't exactly a startup anymore, but it wasn't in the very distant past. Right.
Well, it didn't matter what your job description was. You just did what had to be done.
You did whatever. Right. And where we are now, I think we're in a period of growth, you know, sales wise and listener wise and company wise. You know, there's 3 times as many people. And what that means is we have the privilege of specialization. Right. We can say, like, I can make graphics for you, Bill. I mean, they're graphics. That's what you can say about them. They are graphics. But like, I don't have to do that anymore because I have somebody else who can do it, who actually knows how. It was one of the things that I noticed when we hired Ellie and she started doing social media. I was doing social media along with 9 other things, right? And I had learned enough about it that I could make it work. Yeah. But then watching the change when somebody who's specialized in that took it over, it's phenomenal.
And getting out of their way and providing them the tools, resources, support that they need, and the encouragement, right? I mean, that's a big part of leadership is being the cheerleader of the vision, being the cheerleader of the why. And keeping that top of mind for everybody, particularly when they hit a roadblock, particularly when something doesn't go well, particularly when, you know, something, you know, unanticipated happens. So that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So I'm gonna embarrass you now. So that kind of comes with territory. Nice. So, ladies and gentlemen, this may be my last broadcast on Ancient Faith Radio. But so one of our first Speaking of the,
take you out with the garbage, Bill. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. I'm really good at that. I can do the garbage duty at AFM. You won't remember this, but I do. It's vividly planted in my mind. I was doing a keynote address at one of the conferences several years ago, pre-COVID and stuff like that. And there was a big snafu. There were like 4 or 5 of us at the airport. And there was a big snafu on the shuttle bus to get us out to the village. Certainly not created by Ancient Faith Ministries. It was a mess up in the transport company. And it was getting really close as to whether or not we were going to get there at the time in which everybody else would be finishing dinner and coming for a keynote address. And so I literally am like changing my clothes in the van, you know, to put on a coat and tie and stuff like that. And there's no chance. I mean, there's no thought about food and whatnot. So I get in there to set up all the technology, and you walked in, and you may not remember this. You walked in and then you said, I got a plate of food for you. And when you're done, you know, we'll have some food for you. And I thought that has got to be one of the most thoughtful acts. Not like, hey, I got a bag of, you know, chips and some munchies and stuff like that. But I actually saved a plate of food. And so I got to eat a plate of food because, again, back then you were doing everything, but you were actually thinking and focusing on, you know, what needed to be done in the circumstances and dealing with the change. So I just wanted you to know that. And I hope that you will now have a cafeteria set up so that there'll be constant food. No, I'm sorry. I got a little ahead of myself. Okay.
Virtual. We're virtual.
So this is where you tell me, Marianne, let's get them go down to the refrigerator in your room. Okay. It's like, okay.
Right. Go get some donuts.
Right. So, yeah, that's right. Exactly. So, you know, in my favorite leadership book, the Leadership Challenge book, the quote that I alluded to earlier is prominently featured in there, where it says that the domain of the leaders is the future and the work of leaders is change. And that doesn't mean, and that can be very scary for a lot of people. You've taken that scariness away. So let's start to talk about, we know what we do in the core basis. You've described it well, and you've described that you're adding incrementally more to it. But now let's put the visionary part of Melinda Johnson to test. Let's get in your head and find out what's going on in your head about, take a look 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, the adaptation, the change, the things that you think are just ideas right now bubbling in your head. Share some of those if you're comfortable.
So one of the things that I want to do, I feel like I'm the result of somebody else doing it, which is, I think that it's very important for our company as a whole to always be looking for and developing and mentoring the people who are going to replace us. Oh, because I think you should always have your eye on we're in many respects, we're a voice for a number of things in the Orthodox world. I believe that we're a very important voice. And the only way it's going to keep going is if there's somebody standing behind me and somebody behind that person and behind that person. And that's true for everybody in the company, not just for me. Right. So John trained me. Right. Yeah. So I have all of the benefit that he could give me. We need to do that. We all need to do that. We need to be looking for the next graphic artist, for the next publishing head, for the next, children's book editor, for the next radio head. Like, all of those people are out there in the world. They've probably been born. They're probably growing up. They're ready for us to be looking for them, to be making opportunities for them, maybe internships, maybe, mentoring relationships, something that lets them know this is yours. This is going to be yours. You're going to inherit it. And we want you to be equipped for that. And also, we want you, you can be a valued part of this company, part of this voice. So that's definitely one thing.
Let me stop you right there.
Sure.
This is, I want to make sure that everyone, and this is kind of aligned with kind of the program I do. This is one of the tests of great leaders. Great leaders are always thinking about succession. They're always planning for succession. They already have succession. You see it a lot. You hear it a lot in football parlance where, the quarterback gets injured and the phrase they use is next man up. Everybody mm-hmm. is cross-trained sufficiently that, if God forbid something should happen to one of us, we can get the job done. But unfortunately, many leaders are so insecure about their own leadership abilities that they're afraid to be vulnerable and actually be training their successor. And I think that is very powerful that you are enculturating or continuing, if you will, the enculturation that John and Tanya brought to the organization as it gets bigger, because it's going to become much more critical the bigger the organization gets and the more people come to it. So that is brilliant. That is excellent leadership.
Well, thank you. Well, I think that something that goes with that is that because of where we are as a company, and also I think because I have a natural inclination this way, one of the things that I'm already enjoying is looking at sort of building the structures of companyhood, right? As we've moved away from being a startup, to look at, mm-hmm. And this actually had already started happening before now, but to continue our practice of, documenting things, right? How did I do this? How do I do this? God forbid I got hit by a bus tomorrow and somebody walked into my desk. Would they be able to finish this job? Do I have records of things? There's a lot of beautiful, sort of sometimes unspoken, but certainly undocumented company culture. Like, how do we do things? Yes. Like, what is the ancient faith way of approaching X, Y, or Z? That I would like to see, part of the way you hand those things on to the next generation is to record them, to leave a record of how we made decisions or how, what we valued or, what we have decided we don't do, right? What is our mission and what's not our mission? You can't do everything. So what are what are the things that we do? So
that's part of enculturation. That's fantastic.
Looking at what are these practices and how can we record them and make them, one, easily, referenced by us, but also there and waiting for whoever comes after us. And the other thing I want to do is keep growing, right? So mm-hmm. We're just going to keep watering this little plant and watering, like watching for new technologies or watching for trends. Like, the video is a big thing. We need to expand into that. We need to, maybe there'll be something else after that. I don't know what the next thing will be, but to be on the lookout for that and to be thinking about how we can enter those areas, how we can adapt whatever it is to our needs. We're not Coca-Cola, right? We're not a big secular company. We're a small company. and also we're an Orthodox company. So there are some trends that we really don't want any part of.
That's right. That's right.
Right?
You can be nimble. You can be nimble and faithful at the same time.
Right.
But you've got to be focused on both.
Right. Well, and it's no good being nimble if you're not faithful. Like if we let go of our mission, we might as well close up shop. Like there are plenty of media companies in the world. Nobody needs us unless we are what we are, which is an Orthodox media company.
Right. Right. Wow. So this has been and this completes everybody's first class in leadership development 101. No, seriously. I mean, you've checked so many of the boxes of the kinds of things that we, exactly. And that's the benefit. See, there's no one of those values, right? Of learning from masters and learning from people with excellence, surrounding yourself with people that are better than you maybe so that you can learn from them and they can elevate your game as you elevate their game with other different skill sets. And so I think, hopefully that listeners to Ancient Faith Ministries or participants to Ancient Faith Ministries, whether you're participating in the blogs or the podcasts or the live shows or the publishing arm or the store, any of those aspects, they're not going away. They will be improved. They will be expanded. They'll be the next generation of folks. And by the way, I'll tell you what the next thing is, and you know this, but I've actually, for a paper, this is the thing we do when we research for doctorate programs, is AI. I mean, AI is going to be, artificial intelligence is going to be the next thing that we need to be thinking about. Everybody needs to be thinking about it, to be honest with you. It's even Elon Musk, the visionary Elon Musk, whether you like him or you hate him, it doesn't matter. He says the one thing he's most worried about is artificial intelligence. And from the Orthodox ecosystem, that's something that we need to be out on top of, because it literally could go so badly for Orthodox Christianity if we're not a voice in that space and playing in that game. But that's another program. Okay. So let me ask you a question that is kind of off topic, but is on topic. And that is, as you sit from your vantage point of interacting in the Orthodox orthosphere, as I refer to it regularly, what do you think our biggest challenges are in the orthosphere here? Let's start with the United States, because I think that's kind of the logical
I think
place.
That one of the biggest things I see, and I'm sure this is partly colored by the fact that I am a parent, but also I'm an employer. I think that there is an enormous communication gap or understanding gap between my, Gen X, right? My generation.
Yeah.
And millennials certainly, but also Gen Z, which is, my child is Gen Z, right? So, and I think one of the hardest things about it is maybe both parties, I'll speak for the grownups over here, because that's what I am. I think it's hard for us to grasp how much we don't grasp it.
Yeah.
How big the change is.
That was said so well. Yeah.
I think people assume that they understand more than they do. And so they don't realize, it sounds circular saying that, but because you think you understand, you don't realize that you don't understand.
Yeah. By definition, you don't almost.
Right. And I think a lot of the stress going on in the church, a lot of, young people are leaving. I think that's why they're leaving, because the world that they're interacting with and trying to cope with is so far away from the world that our solutions and our chat and talk and platitudes come from, that it's like, it might as well be a different planet. So it feels like they aren't heard. Like you don't even know what I'm talking about level. Not only it's not even a question of disagreeing. It's, you haven't even heard what I said. You don't even know that you haven't heard what I said. And I think that's a big problem. I mean, every generation, there's, my parents' generation was different than mine, but I think this is a bigger gap. I think that the advent of social media and the technology that goes with it has made a much, much bigger gap between the parent and child generations than in previous
I could not agree with you more. And I think all the research that I've seen on it points in that direction. Now, what we do about it is, of course, always the tricky part, but
that's my second point, Bill.
Okay. There we go.
I think the other thing, and I don't think this is recent, I've seen this in various contexts all my life, people have a terrible tendency to fix the wrong thing. I think that we see there's a problem and we pick the thing that we're inclined to fix, or that's easier to fix, or the first thing to fix, because we don't really want to grapple with the problem.
Yeah, you're attending to the symptoms, not the root cause. If you don't get to the root cause, you're going to see a different symptom manifest a different way. And so we got to get out of the symptomology treating and get into the root cause treating. You are 1,000% correct.
Away from that surface and look for the soul. Like, what is the soul of, or the core of what's happening? So that's a big one. And I think the other thing is letting other people speak for us. I can't remember what we were talking about in this amazing conversation we're having, but you said something about not being a voice, or maybe it was AI. I think the Orthodox are making a good start at being a part of the human conversation, being present on media, being a voice, having opinions on current issues, or making themselves heard. But we got to keep doing that, because if we don't, then what people know about us will be what other people say about us.
Exactly. You can't control the dialogue if you're not engaged in the dialogue. Somebody else is going to be controlling the dialogue. And so I think it's critically important that be that be part of it. I think that is so right. Now, I mean, what it looks like and how it looks like, I mean, who knows? I mean, let me just throw a number at you that won't make any sense whatsoever. Okay. But it's just something that I just came across. So this is last year now, 2020, internet traffic, just the traffic along the internet, exceeded 3 zettabytes. Now, if you don't know what a zettabyte is, you're like everybody else in the universe. But to just give you perspective, that's more than 3 trillion gigabytes. Now, everybody understands what a gigabyte is because we think about that. And here's the amazing thing. That was 2020. The current prediction, or the prediction based on current trends, is that it's going to be 50% larger this year. So just you can't wrap your head around that. And yet at the same time, that's the position you're in. You got to kind of wrap your head around that and say, okay, so what does that mean? Now, because you said something else earlier that was really powerful and really important. Let me make sure nobody misses that. And that is, you can't do everything. I mean, there are a lot of great ideas in the world. And, one of the things that I teach in our strategic planning program for parishes and ministries is we use the 4 disciplines of execution of the Covey organization. And one of the principles there is that you have to say no to good ideas. And sometimes you have to say no to great ideas so that you can put extra effort on the ideas that will make a difference, the ideas that are truly transformational. And it is so hard. And that's where I said before, the yes, but, or the yes, if, or the yes, when. In other words, maybe, but we're just not ready for it right now. And, and I think that's a really powerful point that you made that I think cannot be lost in the exercise here as we start to look out into the future. Well, that's just amazing. So here's a benign question. So let's make now that you start to make the transition, what's a life in the day of Melinda Johnson like? Take us through a day in your life.
My life is, and I think this is what I'm going to love most about, one of the things I'm going to love most about this is, then this was always partly true. A lot of it is conversation. I'm either listening to somebody or I'm talking to somebody all day long. I'm in a meeting, or I'm brainstorming or problem solving, or helping somebody else problem solve and somebody else brainstorm. And I think it's partly that, and also a lot of connecting, right? So I see this person with this skill set and this person with this problem. And if that skill set and that problem got together, there would be a fantastic solution. Like that kind of sort of the human equation, right?
Right.
Both within the organization, looking, here's a strength and here's a need. How can we put them together? And then in the organization's mission and interaction with the church as a whole, looking for, there's somebody who's doing something great. Well, we're a big megaphone, let's use our megaphone to promote what that person is doing that's so great. We can't do it ourselves, but we can give a voice to it for them. Yeah.
There's nothing inconsistent. There's nothing at all inconsistent with being a disciple of the Orthodox Church, Christian faith, however you want to articulate it, and those that are practicing it. I mean, that is, in some respects, a perfect opportunity for Ancient Faith Ministries. And the willingness to engage in that is really a gift that you give the community. So you're talking and you're listening, right? Is that what you do now?
That's what I do. I talk and I listen and I problem solve and I write things, but different things now. Like, I'm writing an employee handbook. The story of what employees do at Ancient Faith.
Lord have mercy. No, outsource
the Great American Novel, not.
No, you need to outsource that. I mean,
no, I don't. Wrong answer, Bill.
You need to make it creative, at least. Make it a fun story. Write it into a story.
I need to let it be what it is. What it is the very first step that I'm making of documenting the culture and the practices of the company that I know. I can't outsource that. No outsource is gonna understand it the way I do.
Okay, well, that's different than when you said employee manual. I mean, we did this in the law firm all the time. Those are the most boring things that nobody ever reads that are just the legal minimum requirements. You're talking about something entirely different. You're talking about the cultural manual. You're talking about something much bigger than the boring legal stuff, although it has to include the boring legal stuff.
No, I'm going to disagree with you, Bill. No, okay, I'm not. I'm talking about an employee manual. But I think things have meaning, right? So this is it's a little document. You know, it's not going to be nobody reads them when they're the size of the encyclopedia.
Amen.
It's the bare bones, but what it is it's us practicing what we're doing. It's us saying, like I said, we're documenting, we're building the bones of ourselves as an organization. We're past the point of being a little startup. We have the mental space, the bandwidth, and the desire to make
creativity,
make that, to make an organization. So one of the things an organization has is a central document where we can go look and see, which are the holidays and what's the policy on travel and like those. So I don't and again, I have too much fun at work. I don't think it is boring. I think it's fascinating because it's my company and it has a manual now. Woohoo!
No, yeah, that's right. There's a celebration. You're the first person I have ever seen in 40 years of practicing law, although I don't practice actively anymore, that got excited about an employee manual. It's such a refreshing, it's such a refreshing thing. It's such a refreshing thing to see that joy in what is usually
it's order, Bill. It's order is one of our values, right?
Yeah, it is.
Transparency and order and integrity and a place for everything and everything its place. That sounds so Navy, but the Navy is one of my formative influences, so that's okay.
Yeah, it's perfect. No, I mean, honestly, that provides the roadmap that everyone's looking for. In other words, you've given me the guardrails, right? So I know what is on the outer limits of behavior. But in the meantime, because you are a creative organization, you're not saying you have to get up at 9 o'clock, you have to sit by your computer at 9:45, because that just doesn't work for the best in class organization. So a beautiful guardrail document that stays committed and focused on the vision and the why and the values is just so perfect at this time.
It's as much about what you leave out of it as what you put into it.
That's the truth. And that's truth about everything, and especially writing, right? It's especially true writing. I mean, one of the exercises that anybody that goes in academic circles gives is, a word limit. And what a powerful thing a word limit is, and so you in the publishing arm are very accustomed to that kind of stuff. And we in the legal side are like, oh no, more words are better. Let's just keep writing. And so
more.
Exactly. And that's why they're incomprehensible. So, anyway, and it's such a beautiful gift that you can give when you can do that. So look, one of the things that I've been abusing your time so much, and I know you've got so many things else to do in your time, but one of the things that is repeatedly mentioned, but I don't think people really understand it, is when it is said on the air, and we have, PSAs that say it all the time, that Ancient Faith Radio is a ministry that is listener supported. Talk a little bit about the listener supported aspects of this enterprise that you're on, because that's very different from just about every experience that every listener has in their daily lives. That ain't what they do for their daily lives. So I'm not sure we're explaining that clearly enough, because if we explain it clearly enough, I think that there'd be even greater support. So put some color behind that. Put your creative writing juices on that.
So we operate with the blessing of the Antiochian Archdiocese, but we are a financially independent entity. So we don't have, somebody else paying for us. We have to pay for us. And we produce products and sell products in our store side. And then on the radio side, we have listener donations, people writing a little check or credit card or donating as they're checking out at the store. That money comes in. That's what pays for Ancient Faith Radio. And I think that there's one of the things that I do now, now that I'm getting trained in and adding to all these systems, like I get to see donations as they're coming in. And I'll tell you something, Bill, they often come with a note, right? Here's my $5, and it says, "I love you guys," or "Hi from Sweden," or this, you were part of my walk into the church, or "I can't live without you." Like we've gotten some amazing letters. And when I think about listener support, I'm thinking about both. I'm thinking about the $5, and I'm also thinking about the love that came with it, because that keeps us going. That is why we get up in the morning and do what we do. So we need your prayer and your love, and we need your understanding, because our jobs can be complicated and the situations that we find ourselves in can be complicated. And we need donations. We need money. That's how we have the equipment and the personnel and, services like audio editing and internet service, right? This is an internet radio station. We have to pay for internet, right? Those are our bills that come in every month, right? Just like everybody else's bills. We have a physical studio that has rent and lights and, all those things. So it's people's, think about it though, like think about how big the company, how big Ancient Faith Radio is. Everybody listening, you bought that. Yeah. That was people, making big donations and little donations. Like we get donations that are like, $1.75, right? That's what you had left as you were checking out of the store, and we get, thousands of dollars. They're all equally valuable. That's what makes it, possible in our incarnational world for this ministry to exist.
And I appreciate the way you've said that. I mean, in terms of, I am, when you're in the stewardship business, quote unquote, because it's not a business, obviously, but when you're in the generosity encouragement approach, the answer is, what's the value to you? In other words, back in the old days, for us really old timers, us boomers, we would say, show me a person's checkbook and I'll tell you what they believe in. I know nobody keeps a checkbook anymore, but show me what somebody's e-investments and e-expenditures are, and I can tell you what they believe in. Right. So for anybody listening who has received any value, probably not from my program, but certainly some of the other great offerings that the Ancient Faith Ministries platform makes available, this is a good time, particularly the holidays is a good time for you to think about how useful has this been for you? How helpful has it been to you? At what point did you get something of value that you didn't really have to pay for? It was given to you. And now you have the opportunity to invest in it because as Melinda, as you said so eloquently, I mean, the equipment that is necessary and stuff like that. I know the studio back in Chesterton just underwent a whole new transformation, albeit because of a water leak, but still, I mean, there's expensive stuff that needs to be done in terms of making this available to the next generation of technology and platforms, et cetera. And of course, the growth of the employee base. So I appreciate you doing that. And I hope that everybody is listening here will think about some value that they receive from something from the Ancient Faith Ministry program and make a contribution. And I'm not asking for small contributions. I'm asking for large contributions. So, and it's not for me. I don't get paid. So it's all cool with me. But, I'm just telling you that this is something that I'm hoping that during this holiday season and frankly, throughout the year, that you will contemplate making an investment in so that others will be served, including yourself and your children and your grandchildren. So I think that's hopefully a big part of what you're all about.
If I could just tag onto that, Bill, do it for the value that you receive, but also recognize that it serves other people. One of the things that I love doing, and I would encourage people to do, you can look on our website and see there's what we call listener comments, I think, years worth of letters that have come in. But we get people telling us things like, I was sitting with someone I love who was dying, and we were listening to Ancient Faith Radio for comfort while that person was dying. We get, when I can't sleep, I put the Ancient Faith Radio app on, and I put it in my pillowcase and lay my head on it so I won't disturb my spouse, and I listen until I fall asleep.
Oh, good. I'm glad they didn't say that. I listened to Stewardship. I listen to Stewardship Calling until that guy puts me to sleep.
Until I fall asleep. That's probably the streaming music station, but seriously, we get the most gut-wrenching, loving people are holding hands with us, sometimes in despair, sometimes in grief, in love, just for company. All of the voices of our writers and our podcasters, those are people who are holding people up. And when you hold up the people who hold people up, you're holding up the people they hold up. I know that sounds very involved.
No, say that slow again.
Are holding Ancient Faith, the people at Ancient Faith are holding people up. This ministry holds people up. So if you hold us up, then you're holding up you're lifting in your arms all of the people that we are carrying.
And you will never see them, and you may never know them, and that's okay. That's not for you to do. That's all in God's eyes. But in the meantime, the opportunity, and so this is why I think this power. This is a leverage investment. This isn't just an investment of in an entity or in paying a salary. It is an investment in leverage. Will you get something out of it? God willing, you will. Will your children get something out of it? God willing, they will. But people you don't know and will never see and will never hear from are also getting a benefit out of that investment. And so that's why I really would ask everybody to think about that in that context, because I think that's fun. And particularly now that, you're going to start, Ancient Faith AI. No, I'm joking. When John first approached me about Ancient Faith Radio, I said, radio? Who has a radio anymore? And he kind of looked at me and he said, oh, you old people don't get it, do you? So anyway, it's all good. It's all good. I'll have some fun with Mr. Maddox in December.
Sure,
but all right, so look, we have so far exceeded and abused your time that it's not even funny. And I thank you for that, because the time is the most valuable asset you have that you'll never get back again. So, but before we sign off, I always give my guests the last chance to offer any final thoughts or insights or anything else they wish they would have said earlier on or want to say late on. So it's all you, and I'm going to back away from the microphone and just listen.
I just want to say that I am thankful to God every day that I get to do what I love for a living. And I know that not everybody has that gift. I wish it for everyone. I wish that everybody could do what they loved for a living. And that I don't take it lightly. I'm thankful for it. And I try to remember every day how thankful I am, not to ever take it for granted, because it is very precious to me. I love Ancient Faith. I love working for Ancient Faith. I'm thrilled out of my brains that I get to do that, to be the CEO. That's an amazing. I'm not done being excited. It might take me a few years to be done being excited. But
don't ever not be excited. Keep it up.
It's looking good, Bill. I don't see this wearing off anytime soon. But I want to end on a note of gratitude. I'm so thankful. I'm so happy about this, and so thankful. And I will do the best I possibly can. I will invest all there is of me in this. And, I ask people's forgiveness in advance for any mistakes that I make. Just know that I'm trying as hard as I can. And if I make a mistake, I will try to learn from it and get up and do better the next time.
Wow. I don't think anybody could have said anything better than that. And I thank you for ending on such a powerful and poignant moment in terms of that, both, with the vision and the encouragement and the enthusiasm, but also in the asking for the humility and asking for forgiveness in advance, because we're all human, we're all going to make mistakes.
We are.
That's normal. One of the things, Melinda, that you've demonstrated, there's an amazing professor. Her name is Dr. Angela Duckworth, who's done some extensive research on a phenomenon that really is one of the distinguishing characteristics of success, and it isn't intelligence, and it isn't appearance, and it isn't education, and it isn't socioeconomic status. It's grit. Grit, just grit, hard work, just pushing forward, moving forward, being enthusiastic about what you're doing, and continuing forward. And I think that's what you've demonstrated tonight in spades, probably, is that you are going to approach this new mission, this new chapter, both in your life and the life of Ancient Faith Ministries, with grit and determination, but committed to the values of the institution that the Maddox family have so carefully crafted and have put into your hands, and what a gift that is. So thank you 1,000 times. Thank you for taking the time away from your schedule to really start to set the vision and the picture of what the new chief visionary officer, I'm going to keep saying that, is going to do. Of course, I always am grateful to Matushka Trudy Richter, who is silent behind there once I grabbed her and put her on the program here, but she is the faithful producer back in Chesterton, Indiana. And I also am grateful to the rest of the Ancient Faith team that make all of this possible and make it sound and seem easy. I'll be back in just a few days for my Stewardship Calling First Wednesday program on November 2nd. For scheduling reasons, unfortunately, it had to be pre-recorded, so I already know it's in the can, but it will be aired on November 2nd, the First Wednesday program, as they always are, at 8 p.m. right here on Ancient Faith Radio. And my special guest, is none other than the person that would normally be talking to you on a Sunday night, and that's Father Evan Armitage. But no, it's not because he's going to do a Orthodox Today program on Stewardship Calling. which he does the other 4 Sundays in this time slot. We're actually going to be talking extensively about his new book that is published by, let me see if I can think the name of the publisher. Oh yeah, it's Ancient Faith. Anyway, it's called Reclaiming the Great Commission. And Father Evan and I have been on somewhat of the same journey out in the orthosphere, and you are not going to want to miss this program, because the two of us dug into, in great detail, his phenomenal book, Reclaiming the Great Commission, that you can get at the Ancient Faith store, and learning how to better serve the Lord and strengthen Christ's church. And then the final show of the year is, I'll be honest with you, the one I was hoping never to do. But I've been given the high honor of interviewing the founder and creative genius behind the extensive global voice of orthodoxy that we call Ancient Faith Ministries. But you're not going to want to miss this program, because I'm going to get John Maddox to tell the origin story and the lessons that he learned along the way. And if you've listened to what Melinda has said in this program, you have learned that she was trained by a great leader. And on that program on December 7th, it's going to air in the first Wednesday slot, as the Stewardship Calling programs generally do, at 8 p.m. You're going to listen to a great leader that trained the great leader you just heard today, and truly one of the finest gentlemen that I've ever met in my life. So that'll be the December 7th program right here at Ancient Faith Radio at 8 p.m. Eastern, where we're going to have a wonderful talk with the Honorable John Maddox. So if you find any of these Stewardship Calling First Wednesday or Fifth Sunday programs, please tell your friends, tune in. You can listen to them live during the archive podcast version. You can always find them at Stewardship Calling website under the Ancient Faith Radio page by looking for the date. And for those of you that aren't keeping track, today is October 30th, 2022. Or you can go, and it's easier to go because all my webpage does is direct you to the Ancient Faith page and go to the Stewardship Calling pages there. And again, drop down to the date, today's date, October 20th. Of course, everyone's invited to check out all the other always free resources at stewardshipcalling.com on the topics of effective churches and stewardship and strategic planning and Orthodox servant leadership. And if you have any questions and you want to reach me, you can always reach me at bill@stewardshipcalling.com. That's bill@stewardshipcalling.com, and I'll be happy to answer it. As I always do at the end of every program, including this program where we welcome to a new chapter of the life of Ancient Faith Radio, a new chapter for Father Johnson, right? And a new chapter for Melinda. I ask you to remember that 2 of the most important days of your life are, first, the day you were born, and second, the day you figure out why. And if you were paying attention, Melinda told you she is living her why. And if you're not already living your stewardship calling, I hope that you'll begin prayerfully to discern your why in stewardship calling, and then start living the most extraordinary second part of your life in the next chapter. Thanks for listening. God bless you. And as always, I pray that you SOTPAETJ, which stands for stay on the path, capital T, capital P, and enjoy the journey. Good night, and God bless.
No end of books these days offer us techniques for self-improvement. But in the newest release from the Ancient Faith store, Gratitude in Life's Trenches, Robin Phillips takes a different tack. He shows us that God meets us where we are, in the pain.